Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of All in All with Alex. I'm your host, of course, Alex. Today we have a very special guest, Miss Angela. How you doing today?
Good. How are you doing, Alex?
I'm doing blessed. I cannot complain. How are you?
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good. So, can you give a quick background about yourself before we dive into the questions?
Absolutely. So, yes, my name is Angela Tipton, and I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease when I was just 19 years old. And I've lived with it, of course, ever since. I've had my ups and downs and struggles, certainly, but despite some of the hurdles that I had to overcome, I was able to build a successful career and actually do a lot with my own personal finances and follow very closely the FIRE movement and pay off large amounts of student debt and get to a point and place financially where I was actually in a good place and could live off of some of my investments, didn't have to work quite as hard as I did in the past, and just have more flexibility to explore and try different things. And yes, this is while struggling with a chronic illness.
Okay, so what was that? What was that moment like when you got that diagnosis at age 19?
Yeah, it was a tough realization. It was also I had a sense of relief because I had actually started having symptoms of Crohn's from the age of about 15 or 16. So I'd been dealing with symptoms for 4 years and I had no explanation whatsoever for what was wrong. And I'd been in and out of doctors' offices, didn't really know what was going on. The doctors didn't know what was going on. In fact, there were times that I went to the doctor's office and it was implied as though I wasn't being truthful about my symptoms or that maybe it was caused by anxiety or something else. That was definitely not the case. But of course, I didn't have that discovery until I was 19 years old. So while it was hard for me to realize that this is something major I would have to deal with for the rest of my life, at least I had an answer to years of unanswered and unexplainable symptoms that I've been having for a very long time.
Right. So with that, so how did you feel like Crohn's diagnosis at 19 impact your career aspirations? Because I'm pretty sure, like at 19, you probably had certain things that you wanted to do in life that you wanted to pursue, but then you thought about like, oh, I wonder how is this going to affect me? Like, how was your mind as far as your career at that moment?
Yeah, that's an entirely valid point. And it did impact my decision and journey through life, especially at such a young age where I was still very impressionable and still figuring out what I was doing with life. So at the time I'd had aspirations of becoming an astronaut. And I realized, and that was one of the things that was hard for me to realize, that it's very, very difficult to become an astronaut. Probably no big surprise, but you basically have to be in perfect health. And I knew with having a major diagnosis like that, that it just wasn't going to happen. And I'd also been considering joining the military for a number of years. And Crohn's disease is one of those things that makes you ineligible from a medical standpoint. So I did. I had to make some pretty major changes, but it was also one of those things that it shaped my journey in ways that were unexpected, but were also really impactful and meaningful in my life. For instance, at the time, I had been going to a college in upstate New York called RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology. And I'd been living in upstate New York for a number of years since high school. So something like 6 years, somewhere around that. And I had decided that I was kind of tired of the New York winters, didn't really want to deal with it anymore. And I started to explore some other things. And I think having my diagnosis in some ways kind of freed up my mind to explore these other things. It was one of those things that I probably wouldn't have considered before. I probably would have just stuck with RIT if I hadn't gotten my diagnosis. But it was kind of this wake up moment, this, I'm not really happy with where I'm at in life and I want to do something different. I finally have an answer to what's been causing me all this pain for these years. And I want to do something different. So I ended up transferring to a school in Oregon. And I'd lived in Oregon when I was a little child. So I had fond memories from growing up. So it's not like I'd never been there. But yeah, it really did change my path and my journey. But honestly, I'm very grateful for those things. And while it's been a struggle to deal with Crohn's, it has opened up my eyes to these different possibilities that I might not have otherwise explored.
Okay. Okay. So, so can you share? Actually, this what do you have any strategies maybe that you use to build a successful career while managing your Crohn's disease?
Absolutely. And that is one of the things that I share about on my website, Fire Your Career. And what I teach people is how to build up their career in such a way that they can be successful while managing a chronic illness and while also achieving a lot of their financial goals, fire or otherwise. So yeah, a few strategies that I share with people are some things that worked for me in the past, and probably no big surprise. Usually the first thing I mention is, if your health isn't in the place you want it to be, do what you need to do to get on track. And I know that's easier said than done. Having been there, I know it is. It sounds a lot easier than it is in reality. But the truth is, it's easy to just let certain things go. And when it comes to managing a chronic illness, you just can't do that. So yeah, you have to go to the doctor's appointments. You have to make sure you're doing what you can to take the proper medications, that you're taking care of yourself. And in my case too, it means incorporating some self-care routines, like making sure I'm going running and doing yoga, managing my stress, things like that. So those things are all really important and are so much more important, I would say, when you're managing a chronic illness on top of it. So yeah, you can do what you need to do from a health standpoint, but then when it comes to the specifics of your career, I would also say don't hesitate to ask for the things that you know are going to be important and necessary to help you be a successful worker. And one of the articles on my website talks about specifically how you can ask for a reasonable accommodation. And if you're not familiar with what a reasonable accommodation is, the Americans with Disabilities Act allows employees to ask for what's considered a reasonable accommodation in order to help them accommodate their disability, whatever that is, so they can be more successful and work more reasonably. This is a reasonable accommodation, so that doesn't mean you can just ask for anything and everything and it's going to be given to you.
Right.
But you can ask for something, for instance, slightly different work hours, making sure you're not standing for long periods of time if that's an issue for you. You can ask for work from home arrangements, among a number of other things. And I have navigated this process myself as well, actually quite successfully. So that is something that I share with people. It's something I advocate for. You really can be your best advocate and should not hesitate to advocate for yourself when you know you can be a more effective team player when you ask for these sorts of things. So I know it's scary sometimes to ask for, and that's why my focus is on equipping people with the tools to help them come prepared to have those conversations with their employers.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. So, can you share some key lessons from experiences in the biotech and life sciences industries?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I've been in the biotech and life sciences industries for the entirety of my career that spans over a decade. I'm trying to remember exactly how long it's been, but first thing I will say, it is a high stress industry, which you might consider kind of ironic considering my health. But it is. There's a lot of innovation and a lot of new opportunities and exciting things that are happening in that space, but it can be at times high stakes. So, a few things that I've learned in my experience is that if you are interested in this kind of an industry, it is so important to be able to manage your stress. And I'll admit there have been times that I haven't done that as well as I should have. And my health has paid the consequences. So I'd say if you're interested in that kind of an industry, just really be mindful of yourself. Don't be afraid to set certain rules for yourself and in some senses with your employer too, to make sure that you are maintaining your health. That is a lesson I've had to learn the hard way a few times, but it is a really exciting industry to be in. There's so many interesting things going on. A few things that I've done in the past is that I've been in the industry for a period of years, but then I also took a break from it a long period of time, which was nice. I was able to start my own business on the side, and it was something that I was just excited to do. And that was something that was following the FIRE movement I was able to do and had the flexibility to do. So I can get into FIRE in more detail, but yeah, the industry itself is very interesting, very exciting. There's some great things to do there. It is hard to break into. What the way that I broke into it really early on in my career is I found a temp role working as a lab technician, and then I was able to work my way up from there.
Okay. So let's talk about the $85,000 of student debt. So how did you go about approaching paying that off in just 18 months? Right? That's a lot of debt, and to pay it off in a year and a half is kind of insane. So how'd you go about
yeah. it was. In fact, I remember the moment, the kind of life-changing moment in some ways, you might say, when I realized how much, so my husband and I, how much my student debt and my husband's student debt combined for, but how much we were paying in interest. That was the thing that was really painful. We were in our tax accountant's office doing our end of the year taxes and whatever, and you're allowed to write off a certain amount of your student loan interest on your taxes per year. And so I had a piece of paper in my hand that said how much I paid in interest. This was strictly just interest on my student loans. This was not the total amount I've been paying on a month-to-month and yearly basis. And it's been a few years since then. So, but at the time, I think it was something like $5,000. And that was the interest in 1 year. But I remember looking down at that. We had started to get into cruising and had a lot of fun. I realized looking down at that piece of paper that I had paid for a cruise with my student loan interest. And when I realized that, I thought, well, I would much rather have the cruise than pay for this and have it just be poof, gone out the window. So that for me was kind of the life-changing moment where I realized I really wanted us to get a handle on our student loans and pay them off once and for all. And by the time my husband and I both went to grad school, and by the time we were both done, we'd actually started with something like $130,000 combined of student debt. I had a vast majority of it because I went to private schools. I would have made different decisions in hindsight, but yeah. So we committed at that point to paying it off. And at first it was a slow trickle. We picked up some extra jobs. We cut back on our month-to-month expenses and so on. And we made some sacrifices in order to make it happen. And we had this chart that we put on, we called it, and we still have it to this day, but we called it our dream board. And we had this chart that was showing us what our month-to-month balance was of our student loans. And it was incredibly motivating to watch that go down over time. And I snapped a picture of it, so I still have that picture. But if you look at that chart from where we began to where we ended, we started off really slow. At the time, I think we only had, maybe an extra $100 here or there to pay off, in addition to what we were paying on top of the minimum. So we didn't start very fast, but towards the end, we picked up a lot of momentum. And yes, we were able to pay off the remaining $85,000 in student debt in just 18 months. So this is something that I encourage people to, is that you might feel like you're starting off slow, but honestly, if you just start being committed to something, you give yourself that time and that grace to keep working towards it, you might be surprised just how quickly you can accomplish something when you put your mind to it. And yeah, it was not an easy feat. We did pick up some extra odds and ends jobs here and there in order to make it happen. But once we were able to do that, it really did free up so many of our finances so that we were able to do other things with that. And it just bought us so much more flexibility. So it was worth it. It took a lot of attention and time and diligence and sacrifices, but it was worth it.
Yeah, because that interest you'd been paying that for a lot of more years.
Yeah.
There's all that
Yeah.
interest alone. So let's say so what motivated you to prioritize financial investments early in your career?
Yeah, honestly, it was one of those things that I was just kind of curious about. In fact, I remember to this day having a conversation when I was pretty early on in my career, one of my early on lab technician roles. In fact, I think it was if not my first, my second full-time job where I finally had access to a 401k. I never invested in a 401k before. I had no idea what I was doing. And I had a conversation with my boss at the time about, how do I do this? How do I navigate this? This doesn't make sense to me. I'm really confused about all these options I had. And at the time he told me, he's like, well, I mean, I can help you get onto the platform and generally tell you how to use it, but I can't really tell you what investments to make. That's just, I'm not really allowed to do that. And I thought, oh, that's kind of an odd answer. So I thought, well, maybe I need to spend some time and actually start learning about this myself. And I did. And I actually realized that there were some fairly simple things you could do when it came to 401ks and other investments and things like that. For instance, one really easy way to invest, if you're one of those people that just doesn't want to get into all the details, it's just too much. As I understand it, it is for a lot of people. So that's totally valid and fair to say. One of the simplest things you can do to actually be quite successful is just simply invest in index funds. If you're not sure what to do, index funds can capture an entire index, such as the S&P 500. So it's like you're investing in 500 very different companies. And the S&P 500, if you follow an index fund that follows that, the S&P 500 takes the best 500 performing companies in that index, and then that is what you get to invest in. Over time, naturally, some of the companies will drop out, others will drop in, but those are the ones that are the best performing. It's a good way to balance out your risk while also getting the potential gains of multiple different companies. And if you look at historical returns of something like the S&P 500, it generally performs pretty well. There are natural dips and natural increases as well. So that's just over time. So honestly, if you're not sure what to do, one of the best things you can do is just simply invest in an index fund and hold it. You have to have, if you're going to invest in the stock market, I will warn that you do have to have a bit of a gut to stomach those inevitable downturns, which do come up. So it's hard, and the inclination is to want to sell when things go down. But the best thing you can do for yourself is hold, especially when it's going down. I mean, I would always caution everyone to use their best judgment, to speak with an accredited financial advisor if in doubt. But one of the best things you can do for yourself is to educate yourself. And yeah, so for me, it started with this curiosity and this is interesting. I don't know about this, but I've always been a bit of a data and numbers geek, and for me it's just kind of fun. So I know that's a silly thing to nerd over, but I really do love it. It's so interesting.
No, that's not. That ain't silly. For the people that are interested in that, so how would they go about investing into like an index like the S&P 500? Would they go on like a common app like Robinhood or something like that to go into the S&P 500, or would they do it a different way?
Yeah, so the first thing you'll need to do is sign up for an account. So you can use, yes, Robinhood is one that's popular. E-Trade, there are a few others. Ally is another one. I'm not sure if they still have it, but it was one I was looking into at some point. So there are a few different options. I personally favor E-Trade because I like the access to the different data. I've never used Robinhood personally, so I can't speak much about that, but I do have friends that have used Robinhood. So I'm just not very familiar with it. E-Trade, though, is one that I use and quite enjoy using. I find that it makes it very easy to do research on different stocks and so on. And so, yes, a majority of my investments are in index funds, but I also get kind of a thrill and joy out of picking out individual company stocks as well. So I'll do that in addition to investing in index funds, although I will always plan on most of my investments in the stock market are going to be focused on index funds just to balance out my own risk. But for me, it's kind of fun to pick out companies I think are going to be successful. And I'm not always right. I mean, believe me, I've had my share of failures. So the other thing I caution is that, when it comes to things like that, especially when you're picking out individual company stocks, you do have to treat it as a risk that it is. I wouldn't say it's quite akin to gambling at a casino, but it's also not that far from the truth. So just keep that in mind. You don't want to invest in something that you can't afford to lose.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's see. So how do you define living below your means, and what tips can you offer to others?
Absolutely. So, one of the most important things, and we talked about FIRE a little bit, and let me just start by explaining that a little bit more. The FIRE movement stands for Financial Independence Retire Early. And this is a community or a movement that's designed around building up your finance. And there are different levels of FIRE. So, there's not any wrong or right way to approach FIRE. But the idea, of course, is that you put so much into your investments that in theory, you when it gets to a certain point, you can live off of those investments. And if you want to retire early, you can. You don't have to. That's of course optional, but it gives you that freedom and flexibility to do that if you want. So that's the basis of the FIRE movement. Alex, can you remind me of the question? I started there and then I realized I didn't quite get to the point of the
No,
question
no,
you
no.
were asking.
Yeah, you're fine. So how do you define living below your means? And then what tips can you offer others?
Thank you. Thank you. That's helpful. So, yes, living below your means is a critical component of FIRE. And what it means to live below your means is essentially that you're not living paycheck to paycheck. And this is something that requires a lot of discipline. It is very natural and easy that as you build up your career, as you get increases in what you're making with your job and so on, it's natural to want to spend more, to get a bigger house, to get a nicer car, and so on. That's not to say that you can't still do those things, but what is important, especially if FIRE is important to you, is that you're living below your means. And there are some in the FIRE community that living below their means means that they are investing 80% of their paycheck and they're only spending 20%. Now that's pretty extreme. And
Yeah,
that's hard for most people.
yeah,
And I'll admit that that is not something I can imagine myself being able to do. Maybe if I lived in another country where the cost of living is significantly lower, but so it is hard. And you don't to achieve FIRE, you don't have to do anything near that drastic. You can start small, even if you're only saving up 5% of your income to start out. That's not a bad place to start. It means that you're not living paycheck to paycheck, you're investing something. But what is going to be important over time, especially if you want to achieve FIRE, is that you start increasing the amount you're able to save. So, maybe you start with just $50 here, $100 there, maybe you increase to 5%, then it becomes 10% of your income that you're investing, then 20%. So whatever is reasonable. But to achieve FIRE, yes, it's critical that you live below your means, that you're able to save a decent portion of your income and put those into investments or into savings or whatever else that are going to support your financial goals. So yeah, not always easy to do, and it definitely requires a lot of discipline. And I know, especially with the way the economy is right now, it's easier said than done. But I've seen people with even like teacher salaries or salaries where they're not, they're making lower incomes. Even if they can do it, I think many of us can do it. But it's a different way of thinking. And that's the other thing that I teach about on my website, Fire Your Career, is that sometimes you have to challenge your mindset too. It's not something that is natural or that comes to us naturally. We don't tend to do that, especially as Americans, think that, oh, I should save more. No, it's spend, be a consumer. And those things are great. And it's nice to be able to participate in the economy. But if you do want to achieve FIRE and you're committed to doing that, it is absolutely necessary to live below your means.
yeah. I definitely would agree with that. I definitely would agree with that. So, I know we're kind of jumping around the place. So, so what inspired you to start your first business in 2017?
Yeah. So the thing that inspired me to start my first business, honestly, it was I'd say leading with curiosity. It was something that I'd always kind of aspired to do, that I was curious about doing, that I wasn't sure really what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to do something on my own independently that was outside of work. So yeah, I started my own first business. My first business was in copywriting, and I sold a lot of my copywriting services to other clients. And I did that for a while, enjoyed doing that, and it was a good experience. Eventually, I ended up leaving that and doing something else. But yeah, I'd say just honestly curiosity, wanting to explore different things, and doing what I've done with my own personal finances, I was able to get more freedom and flexibility to explore different ideas like that. And it's nice to be able to experiment with those things and have that flexibility.
Right, right. So, what was the moment that helped you transition from your corporate role to entrepreneurship?
Yeah. So the moment that helped me transition from corporate to entrepreneurship, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, or not necessarily the moment, or maybe or maybe was it something financially that made you change, uh or was it just a moment that you realized, you know what, hey, it's time for me to just go ahead and do it because it's hard balancing the two, or what made you finally do that change from going from there to being a full-time entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I'd say that the moment for me, there were probably really a few different moments. It was thinking that I wanted to try something different. It was so I'll back up just a little bit with where I was in my career at the time. I had been working in lab oriented type of roles for a number of years, and I'd worked my way up to becoming a lab manager. And I looked at my manager at the time's position, and I realized that I wasn't really interested in continuing on that path. I didn't really want that. And so I started to ask myself, okay, well, what's next then? If not that, what else do I do? So that was one moment. There was another moment too, that in that same role, I remember being in a meeting with I was considered a project leader at the time, but I was in a meeting with other project leaders. And I remember looking at the faces that were around me. They just looked really tired, really just haggard, and it just didn't seem like anyone wanted to be there. They were just there because they had to be. And I remember thinking that I don't want that. I don't want to be one of those tired faces looking back at a version of myself that's younger. So I started thinking about, what else can I do? Is there something different that I can do? And somehow at some point I started exploring marketing and communications. I'm not even entirely sure why I eventually focused in on that, but I remember at the time that when I was exploring different ideas, one of the things that I came back to is how much I love to write. And I had always really loved reading as a kid. I self-published my first novel in 2017 as well. And it just was a totally different experience. I did that for fun at the time. And I thought, this is something really interesting that I'm good at, that I like. And I thought it tied in reasonably well to my background. So I thought, maybe I can do something here and maybe this would be a lot more fulfilling. So it was wanting to be on a different path, but not entirely knowing where exactly I wanted to take my path. So I did that, and I was a full-time entrepreneur for a while. I actually did end up diving back into my corporate career in the last few years or so. And again, it was leading with that curiosity that, I kind of want something different. I guess I've been one of those people that when I want to try something different, I do. I just kind of dive head first into it and just hope I come out better on the other side. And I haven't always, but somehow I find myself back up on my feet and doing that and having that kind of adventurous spirit, you might call it. I've been able to find myself in interesting positions that I might not otherwise have been, that I wouldn't have thought would bring me so much excitement and joy, but really have. And being able to do what I've done with my finances has given me that flexibility and freedom to try different things. And I've always really enjoyed that. And I'd say a lot of that stems from my experience earlier on in life. When I got my Crohn's disease diagnosis, I realized that if this is a life I have to live, I'm going to live it on my terms, and I'm going to find a way to make it happy and make it fulfilled and do what I want with it. And, never mind what anyone else has to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
At the time when I left my lab management job, I had a lot of family members talk to me, and it was a very good job, and I could have stayed there for a long time if I'd wanted. I was successful in that role, and I did enjoy it for a time. But I had family members ask me, why would you leave something like that? That doesn't make any sense. And it made perfect sense for me at the time. And it's sometimes hard to explain your reasoning to people when it comes to things like that, especially when they think you have this great job. Why would you possibly leave it? But
Right.
for me, it's always been leading with purpose and with joy, and also allowing myself to be curious. And in doing that, I've been able to actually accomplish quite a bit.
Right. Right. Yeah, I agree. So what role has yoga played in your personal and your professional life?
Yeah, yoga has actually been one of those things that I've done. Boy, I've been practicing yoga for I think over a decade at this point. So a long time. So it actually has had a pretty big impact in my life. And like with a lot of things, it was one of those things I was just kind of curious about. I wanted to try and explore. And I started my first yoga practices not really knowing what I was going to get out of it. I didn't know what I was doing. I think I bought some beginner yoga video on Amazon or something at the time, and that's how I got into it. And I just remember, even early on, that I just felt really refreshed. It helped me just kind of de-stress and have a moment to myself and connect with myself. And it's one of those things that has continued to do that for me. A few years ago, I joined a local community group called Yoga and Beer. So we go to different breweries and then different wineries. That's been a little bit more recent, different wineries, and go to some of these really nice spots and just practice yoga. And if you're so inclined, you can get a glass of beer or a glass of wine or whatever makes sense for you, or nothing at all if you prefer. It doesn't really matter. And I've really enjoyed being part of that community as well, because it's nice to practice yoga with a community that's supportive, that's open-minded, that's happy to just have you there and be there with them. And there's no high pressure at all. One of the things that they say at the beginning of each yoga practice is do what feels good for your body. If it means laying down on a yoga mat and sleeping that entire class, so be it. I've seen people do it. So there are people that do that. I like to push myself, so I tend to do some slightly more challenging poses, but it's one of those things that has allowed me to connect with myself, to focus on my self-care, to just be there and be present. I think that's one of the other things too, is that I've always been a very ambitious person. I'm trying the next thing, doing something different. And with yoga, it really puts me in that present moment. It helps me just find balance, find relaxation. And it's nice to have that when I'm otherwise tend to be so much on the go.
Right, right. So, which one? For some reason, echo right now. I don't know why, but anyway, there it is. So how do you incorporate? So you do yoga. So how do you also incorporate running into your busy schedule as well?
Yeah, running is one of those things too that is another thing that has helped me find balance. And running, I haven't done quite as long as yoga. I've probably been running for, I don't know, I guess maybe 7 or so years. But anyways, running is one of those things that also helps me just connect with myself and be in the present moment. And I feel so free. And anyways, it's a great thing to have both the running and the yoga in my life. And it's hard. I mean, I'll admit it is hard to find both of those things in my schedule. Like this week, I normally like to do yoga on Monday evenings. And then I usually will run on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And that's generally my schedule. This week, my schedule was so busy. I had so many things going on that I think I did yoga Thursday night, and then I ended up running Wednesday and Friday. So I'd say my weeks are not normally like that, but having an established rhythm for myself can really help when I can expect that, hey, this is my yoga night, or hey, this is when I'm going to go running. Having that routine helps keep me in that moment. Sometimes, like this week, I have to be slightly flexible, but I still make it a priority. And I know, and I've learned the hard way, again, that if I neglect my self-care, if I don't do these things, then I, over time, will start to feel those effects with my health. So I do focus as much as I can on maintaining that schedule, or being slightly flexible where I have to. Honestly, as long as I'm getting to running at least twice a week, and then I'm doing yoga at least once a week, I'm pretty happy. I might take a week here or there if I'm on vacation, for instance, and maybe I'll take a break. But otherwise, I do work to maintain that rhythm, and that works quite well for me and helps me be in a much better headspace and be healthier overall and be more committed to what I'm doing with work, and with my website or whatever else I'm working on.
Okay. And speaking of vacation, so how has traveling influenced your perspective on career and financial independence?
Actually, a lot. Yeah, one of the things I most appreciate about traveling is it's one of those things that has allowed me to open my eyes and understand how different our experiences are when we're with other cultures or we're learning different things from them. I've been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to see a lot of Europe. I've been in and out of a lot of countries in Europe. And then I've traveled to other countries as well, but one of the ones that had the biggest impact on me was when I traveled to India. Um, as you can probably imagine, it is a very, very different culture. And there are things that you can take for granted as an American. Like I remember I was 18 or 19 the first time I traveled out of the country. And I went to Finland. That was the first opportunity I'd had to travel anywhere. And I remember just being so surprised that there weren't garbage cans anywhere. They had, I think, a few here and there, but public garbage cans are just not a thing. And it's one of those things that as an American, you just take for granted. There's a garbage can on just about every corner, right? Not in Finland. And then the other thing, too, is that you have to pay to use a bathroom. so, um, and as someone with Crohn's disease, having to pay to use a bathroom, it's a little bit of a hardship. I was in and out of some of those bathrooms on various occasions, but I actually really appreciate travels like that because they challenge my mindset. They challenge me to think differently, to not take things for granted, and realize that it's kind of a gift to be able to have a garbage can on every corner. It's simple, and you don't really think much about it, but not until you're in a different country anyways. And in India definitely was an experience like that. And I'd heard stories before I went to India, but it doesn't quite resonate with you until you're actually there in person. And it is sad, and I feel bad for a lot of people that live there, but being born just as an American is a gift in itself. And we often take that for granted. But in places like India, there are so many people, and the government just doesn't have the resources to support them when they're in need. And so when I was there, I did see people through various places that were literally starving on the streets. And it makes you really feel for those people, and you want to help them, and you wish you could do more. And it's hard and it's sad, but at the same time, it also makes you realize just how privileged and fortunate we are. And I I was able to recognize that for myself, having been there and having traveled there. And there are a lot of people that are doing great things in India to support them and help them. And I'm grateful for those people as well. But yeah, just being born as an American is a gift in itself. And you just don't quite realize that until you travel to a place like that. So I would say that yes, travel has had a huge impact on my life, on my mindset. It's allowed me to think in different ways, to explore different concepts. And I'm still very passionate about travel. So it's one of those things that will continue to be a priority to me in my life.
Okay. So how do you approach financial education for your children? Because that's something that a lot of people didn't have growing up. They didn't have that financial education from their parents
Yeah.
because a lot of our parents they were learning. They were just learning. So they didn't know. They were just learning. So they couldn't teach us something they didn't know. So how do you approach that now with your children?
Yeah, no, that's a totally valid point. I mean, yeah, our parents do the best that they can, and they can't always be there for us when we need them. And so, yes, I have dedicated to doing differently for my children. I mean, I would say I'm definitely fortunate in that respect that my dad was able to teach me a few things here and there, although I did learn considerably more as I became an adult, which is fine and to be expected. But my kids are still pretty little. My oldest is going to be 6 next month, and my youngest is 3. So,
Oh,
I
okay.
mean, we're still pretty early on in a lot of the things that they're learning, but they can learn some pretty simple things like, for instance, having a savings account and budgeting and really simple things like trading. I mean, these are really, really simple skills that even at a really young age, you can start to teach kids. So it's one of those things that while my boys are still little, I still want to support their development and understanding that, hey, we don't just go and spend everything every time, anytime we get a dollar. We don't just run off to the dollar store immediately and go buy something. You might save it, you might set it aside for something bigger and try to save a little bit more or whatever. So little things like that. As my boys continue to get older and can have a better understanding of these things, I will definitely involve them quite a bit more with making smart financial decisions. And I think that's super important. And we're just not getting that out of schooling, out of our education system. I think we learn some really valuable things in school, but learning simple things like how to pay taxes, how taxes work, how to invest, we don't learn those things in school. I never learned those things in school. Yeah, I mean, that's something that I had to teach a lot of that stuff I had to teach myself as an adult. So, I mean, there's only so much we can do with the schooling system that we have to some degree. We can teach a lot ourselves. And that's something that I would encourage other people to do, is that there are some great books that are available right now that can teach you so much about finances and investing. One of the first books that I read was a really simple one called the Boglehead's Guide to Investing, and really simple, talks about index funds and what the benefits are of index funds. That's a great one. Another one that's a little bit more complex, counter to the name, is The Beginner's Guide to the Stock Market. That's one that has a little bit more of math and things like that, but still really valuable. I'd say it's a little bit more complex. It says it's a beginner's guide. That's arguable. But there are other things too, like
What was the name of the first book?
The Boglehead's Guide to Investing.
Okay.
Yeah, and Boglehead is, I know it sounds silly, but Bogleheads, I'm trying to remember the story. It's been a long time since I read the book, but Bogleheads come from, I'm trying to remember his name now, but the founder of Vanguard. They're essentially followers or people that were inspired by his work. So Bogleheads, and I can't even remember now. It's been so many years since I read the book, but the Bogleheads are followers of this movement of these ideas, essentially.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I guess one of the last questions I'll probably ask is what tips or maybe common practices or so on that would you recommend to anybody that wants to start their own fire?
Yeah, great question. So I'd say, yeah, I love that. Yeah, so I'd say one of the first things you can do for yourself that will continue to benefit you for the rest of your life is invest in your own financial education. And it can be as simple as reading some blog posts. It can be as simple as the other thing I didn't mention is there's one of the things I started doing really before I got much into investing is there's an investing simulator. I'm trying to remember the name of it. If you look on Google and you just type in investing simulator, you can find it. And for me, it was really helpful because I was not confident about investing at all. So the investing simulator gives you fake money. I think it was like $100,000 of fake dollars. But what's really nice about this investing simulator is it follows the stock market in real time. So while you're investing with fake money, you get the chance to see how your investments are performing. And it's really nice because you don't have to use your real money in order to use it, but you can test out your investing knowledge or experiment and not feel as as though the stakes are as high, because they're not. You're
Right.
just using fake money, but you can also see how well your ideas are doing. The one thing I will caution about this, and I caught this in myself, is that if you're using that, you're inclined to invest more money or pick riskier things you might not otherwise if it's real money. So just keep that in mind. There's no harm in taking some risks when it's not real money, when you're playing with fake money, but just realize that your mindset is probably going to be a little bit different when you're actually using your real dollars, which is totally valid. So I'd say invest. So start by investing in your financial education. Start with that stock market simulator, with reading some financial books, some blogs. Investopedia is another great resource. So that's a great place to start. So start there. The other thing too I'll mention is, if you're passionate about building a successful career to fire your finances, as I've been, I would say invest in your career as well. And if you want some really simple concepts on things that you can use to help you fire your career, I do have a free ebook that you can get on my website. It's called 7 Ways to Fire Your Career. And there are some really simple things you can do, like pay off debt. There's some other things there, like living below your means is on there as well. And I know we had talked about that in pretty good detail. And that really is an important thing to do if you want to light your own fire, as you said. So yeah, those are some great resources. Don't hesitate to invest in yourself, to invest in your career. Over time, as your career grows, you'll see income gains, and that will help you invest more money into your financial and fire goals. So that would be really valuable as well. But as we talked about, living below your means is important, and it requires a lot of discipline, but it really is a lot more achievable than you might believe. It does require commitment, and it requires you to be focused and keep working towards that. But you can do that even if you have a smaller salary. So just be mindful of that. You can grow your income. Just try not to grow your spending proportionate to your income gains. If you can be disciplined in that manner, you are already well on your way to fire, without whether or not you realize it. So that is key. I'd say that's a great place to start. There are other techniques and tools you can use as well. I'd say anyone looking for more specifics beyond that, visit the Fire Your Career website for other great resources and information. Depending on where you're at, there's probably an article there to help support you throughout your journey. But that's a good place to start.
Okay. Sounds good. So, so how can people from my audience, how can they support you, or either if they want to maybe like use your services, do they just visit your website, or how can they go about doing that?
Yeah. So yeah, I have, my website is fireyourcareer.com, and it's spelled just like it sounds. So FIREYOURCARER.com. That's a great place to go. If you want to follow, I do have a weekly newsletter that I send out as well, and you can sign up for that. A great place to start is to download the free ebook, and that's at fireyourcareer.com/ebook. There are also links to that on the different articles on my website. So I'd say visit the website, explore that, utilize those resources. They are there for the taking. I don't charge for anything that's there. So feel free to openly explore that. There are lots of great resources that are available. And if anyone has specific questions, I am also a very open book. I love getting emails from people, so don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or anything else that you'd like to see on the website too.
Okay, perfect. So I want to take this time to tell you thank you for coming on to have a chat with me today and talk to the audience. I know you're a very busy woman, so I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Alex. It's been great to be here.
Oh yes, definitely. So everyone watching, you guys go to fireyourcareer.com, go support Angela with everything that she has going on. And just go download the ebook. You'll be surprised, how your life can change with just the smallest thing. So but you guys have just watched another episode of All in All with Alex, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Peace.